Well, it's a cool October morning, and I'm back out here on the Natchez Trace Parkway. Back in May, I ended my journey here. Right there at that point, the trace was closed for about 25 miles. So I ended the journey there, and now I'm back, and the road's open. So I'm going to continue my journey up to Nashville, stopping at all the wayside points along the way. Today, I'm going to start right here at Tishomingo and head to Meriwether Lewis Campground. I'm gonna hit about 25 stops along the way. It's about an 84-mile trip. So let's get going and see what we can get into today. Now, if you're not sure what the Natchez Trace Parkway is, it's a road that goes from Nashville to Natchez, Mississippi, and it follows the ancient Natchez Trace Trail that was used by Indians, travelers, settlers, Civil War, that sort of thing. Now, if you want more information about it, or if you want to look at some of these spots that I hit on the south side of this parkway, I'll leave a link to a playlist in the description box below. And that will show you some of the other journeys and stops I made along the way. And our first stop here is at Cave Spring. Not too far away from the Tishamingo campsite. It has an information placard here that talks about the Trail of Tears when the Indians were removed in the 1830s forcefully by the U.S. government. Now shortly, right across the parking lot, is a little lookout point. It talks about the sinkhole that is here. And there is the cave. Now off to the left of that lookout point is a set of stairs that you can walk down and go right to the cave. Very interesting and literally very cool. Now off to the right side of the parking lot is an even larger cave. So let's step on down here and see what this is all about. Now there is a little observation platform, but it's kind of blocked by these bushes here. I so happened to bring me a flashlight. I'm not going to go in here too far. You actually hear water running or dripping. Very eerie, let's just say that. Maybe because I'm here by myself? I don't know. It's kind of walking into the unknown, I guess you'd say. It's kind of interesting how the ferns are growing on this rock. Nature will find a way. Very interesting. And that water is pretty clear. Not sure if you can see how clear it is, but it is pretty clear. And I can't see if the cave goes back too much further. It might, but not too much further. That water's probably about 3-4 foot deep. So that is pretty interesting. Not a very large cave by any means. But when you think of Mississippi, you don't necessarily think of caves. And You're gonna find one right here on the Natchez Trace Parkway. Let's get on to the next stop, which is the Bear Creek Mounds. And it is the last stop in Mississippi. And this is the Bear Creek Mound. This is the last stop in Mississippi, as the state line is right there. Now this mound has been around from about 1100 AD to about 1300 AD. Now when the National Park Service acquired this land, this mound was nowhere near the size it was. And they've restored it to its approximate full size. It's about 8 feet tall and about 85 feet wide. Now if you look how it has a flat top, this is what's called a structural mound. This is not a burial mound. There is a difference. Now located somewhere out in this area here is the Bear Creek. And this whole area was the site of an Indian town. And they would place their houses, their huts, teepees, that sort of thing on top of these mounds, which would give them a little bit of protection in case of enemies coming to fight them or kill them, that sort of thing. They had a little bit of advantage to it versus if they were on the ground. Goodbye, Mississippi. Welcome to Alabama. And this is the Bear Creek picnic area. There's some tables off that way. Some tables over this way. It's a very, very large area. I'm sure if you were bicycling on the trace, you could come out here and pitch your tent and they wouldn't have a problem with it. Now just the other side of these picnic tables and grills is the Bear Creek. This is the creek that ran for the backside of that property of where that Indian mound was. It's a pretty wide creek here. And a decently sized drop off that I'm not going to get down. And if you really wanted to get close to the creek, here in the corner of the off to the right hand side, there's a little trail you can come down. And if the water is low like it is now, you go out there on that sandbar and have your picnic or lay out in the sun or do whatever you want to do. Enjoy nature. This is the Freedom Hills Overlook. It's about a 1/4 mile trail that goes up that way to the highest point in Alabama that's on the Natchez Trace. So we're going to take a little hike here and see what we can see from the overlook. Now this trail starts at 30 feet above sea level and ends at 800 feet above sea level. So there's about a 770 foot climb to the top. This will definitely get your blood pumping and you breathe a little bit heavier. Now at the top there is park bench for you to sit on. But y'all take a look at this view. Now I'm not sure how well this is going to be seen on camera, but you can see for miles and miles and miles. Probably one of the best overlooks. No, this is the best overlook I've came across so far on the Natchez Trace. It was well worth the hike up the trail there. Now this is the site of a Chickasaw stand as well as a spring. Now in order to operate a stand, or what we call today an inn, an Airbnb, motel, that sort of thing, in order to operate one on Chickasaw land, you had to be either a Chickasaw or married to one. Now this was, I think, a Colbert that operated this stand, and he was married to a Chickasaw. Now, other Indian nations would allow foreigners to operate stands on their property, and they would take probably a fee or something like that. But off to the left of that sign here is some old steps that lead down to this spring. This spring was vital to the stand in the town here of Indians. Provided them fresh water, which we all know you need water to live. And this right here, at the base of this rock outcropping, is the Buzzard's Roost spring. This is a naturally flowing spring that heads off out for the woods and mountains here. This whole area at one time was a homestead for the Choctaw Indians. Now, up that way is that information stand we looked at, and there's some old rickety steps and a trail that comes around. Or to the left side of the parking lot, up that way, is another trail. Now this trail here is a little bit more forgiving than the other. It is not as steep. So once you climb out of that holler there away from the spring, you come up on this here information stand that tells you about the trace, some rules, regulations, and a voice box that no longer works. But need some information, here you can get it. So this section of highway here has a lot of new pavement on it. Now I'm going to assume this is the area that was closed down, that they were doing construction work and there were some washouts and things like that. This is the reason why I stopped my trace journey back in May at Tishomingo, because it was closed while they worked on this section. And I'm glad they got it open, because if not, I would have missed on the Bear Creek Spring and Buzzard's Roost and the cave and all that good stuff. So I'm glad it's open, and let's get on to our next stop. Now here is Colbert Ferry Park, right on the Tennessee River. Now right through there is an old ranger station that's no longer in use. And on the back side of it, there's restrooms if you'd like to use. Now this is one of 5 bicycle campgrounds here. It's the site of George Colbert's ferry that crossed the Tennessee River. Now just inside the park here is a trail that leads you to where George Colbert's stand was located. Now, George had a brother named Levi, and Levi ran the Buzzard Roost stand that we were just at here a couple minutes ago. Now, George operated a stand and a ferry across the Tennessee River, which is behind me, which we'll check out here in just a minute. Now, it is said that when Andrew Jackson came through with his troops trying to cross the Tennessee River. Old George, looking out after his well-being, said, "I'll let you cross. It'll cost you $75,000. Now you think, $75,000, even in today's money, that's a lot of money. But we're talking back in the 1860s. So that was a monumental amount of money that George charged the troops to cross the river. And I believe this section we're in here, this is the original location of Old George's Stand. Now if you keep on going past the stand, away from the parking lot, there's more of a nature trail that takes us to a scenic overlook. I believe that overlooks the Tennessee River. So we're going to go head down this scenic trail and see what's at the end of it. Okay, so that trail just basically led me right back where I started from. There's no significance of that trail unless you want to get out and stretch your legs. Now this stroll wasn't a total loss. I did come across one of those Indian trail marking trees, which kind of makes sense in this area, if it is so true that those are Indian trail marking trees, because old Colbert Stand is right through the woods there and not too far from the Tennessee River. Now here's something interesting I found on the way back. U.S. government land boundary marker. It's right here beside George's Colbert Stand. If you know what the significance of that sign is, y'all let me know in the comments below. That kind of intrigues me what that's for. Now this is the approximate site of George Colbert's Ferry. This is where he charged the troops $75,000 across the Tennessee River. Now looking at the size of that river, it may have been worth it. Now just to the north of here is the John Coffey Memorial Bridge. See there. Now John Coffey was instrumental in the Indian Removal Act of 1830, where they gathered up and barged Indians from this point and from across the point over there and barged them up the Tennessee River and headed to Oklahoma. Now some Indians went peacefully, some didn't. Just kind of weird why they would memorialize such a person who did such things to the Indians back in the day. Now this is just north of where we were just at, the north side of the park. There's a boat launch over that way. Plenty of picnic tables over this way with unobstructed views of the Tennessee River. And there's more picnic tables back off in the woods there. If you're looking to relax or launch your boat, good spot for it. Now on the way over here, I was kind of wondering why this area wasn't ever made into a campground. There's restrooms back here. There's restrooms at the front and lots of land. Now some of the land is not flat, which I can understand, but there's plenty of places along the roadside back here that could be used for campground. And like I said before, it is a bicycle campground. but not a car camping RV type campground. I'm guessing maybe funding to upkeep and everything else, some things like that. And it could be also spacing. The campgrounds are about 150 miles apart, so this kind of might have bisected that 150-mile stretch of land, but lots of open spaces out here to sit out and enjoy nature or do what you want to do. Now, if you want more views of the Tennessee River, there's another little waterway viewing area. But we're going to continue on the trace and head to our next stop. Now, this is the Rock Spring Nature Trail. It is about a half-mile loop trail that takes you through the woods to the side of where a spring pops up, kind of forms a creek. Now, when doing my research on the Natchez Trace Parkway and all that stuff, this is something that really intrigued me. Now, not because of the historical aspect of this piece, but the part that you're going to see here in just a little bit. And this right here is exactly what I was talking about. How they got these little bricks or stones crossing over the creek as it flows through the woods here. Now, this is fed by a natural spring. It comes out somewhere in that way. There's supposed to be beavers and possible beaver dams out in this area. So we're going to keep our eyes peeled for some beavers. Now, once you cross that creek, there's a split in the trail and it loops back around. But the left side takes you back here to this pond. I'm trying to be quiet. Maybe you might get to sneak up on a beaver in here, so let's sneak around here. There's one of the beaver dams where they're trying to dam the creek up. There's another one over there. Now, there's quite a few informational placards on the side of the trail here that follows around this dammed up creek area. And one of them talks about this right here. This is where the water is literally coming out of the ground from underwater aquifers. Basically a spring and has an underwater pool in it. And you can see the water bubbling up there from the ground. That in turn feeds this stream, which makes the beavers mad, and they build dams to dam it up. Now the trail turns away from a lake down there, and you meander up this hillside and it moves back around to the stones in the creek there. There's also informational placards on this part of the trail as well. I bet you if you sat here long enough, you definitely see some wildlife. It's very quiet back here. Now this stop is not directly on the Natchez Trace. It's about 3/4 of a mile off the trace. But this is where James Harrison Wilson amassed the largest cavalry ever in the Western Hemisphere. It was done in 1865 in the Civil War. There was about 22,000 troops that camped out in this area. After this camp, they went on into Alabama and burned buildings in Tuscaloosa and ravaged towns like that. Now, probably one of the main reasons why they were here was this here natural spring that comes out of the side of this fairly large, let's just say, mountainside hill. Now it looks like at one point part of the spring would leave the mountainside right there out of that hole there in the rock work, where this area would kind of fill up and meander down that little waterway. There's no telling how long this has been here. It's pretty interesting piece of American history that you don't really hear about and definitely don't see enough of. Like I said, it's right along here on the side of the Natchez Trace Parkway. I just can't imagine 22,000 troops hanging out in this area, just itching to go. Either way, it's pretty interesting. Goodbye, Alabama. Hello, Tennessee. Now this is the Cypress Creek picnic area, just past the Alabama-Tennessee line. Now I did another video right before I got to the state line, and it's not an official stop on the Natchez Trace, but it's literally a 1/16 of a mile off the trace. And it involves the longest mortarless stone wall in the United States. It was built by one man to commemorate his great-grandmother, who fought her way out with a trail of tears and headed back to her home. It took her over 5 years to do. It took him 30 years to build that wall. Now that video will be put out after these videos, but I will put it in the playlist of the Natchez Trace because it kind of goes along. Now this is the Cypress Creek picnic area. As you can tell, there is plenty of picnic tables and trash cans out here right beside Cypress Creek. It's a nice little flowing creek, and looks like somebody has built a little walkway across the creek there. I don't know why you want to cross it, but if you're so inclined to do so, you can. Pretty nice little area just off the trace. Got lots of places to have your picnic at, relax, sit here by the creek. Now this is the Holly picnic area. And one thing I've noticed now that I'm in Tennessee, the wayside signs are different. They're more of a basic sign than kind of the, I guess you say, fancier ones that were in Alabama and Mississippi. Just kind of struck me as odd. And also in Alabama and Mississippi, there are signs on the trace that say you know, what your next stop is, half-mile away or quarter-mile away. They don't have these, or I haven't seen any yet here in Tennessee. So if you're planning on hitting all these stops or looking for particular stops like I am, I suggest dropping pins on your Google Maps and turn your GPS on. Because if not, you're gonna have to be turning around and backtracking because there's no notice, let's just say. So this picnic area here has about 8 to 10 picnic tables and grills and trash cans all over. And then there is the Cedar Creek that we looked at in the previous rest stop, which is about 2.5 to 3 miles away just south of here. And here's Cedar Creek again as it flows in the backside of this quiet little picnic area. Now if you follow the creek down towards the right, there's a little, I guess you could say, nature trail that takes you to a country road. There's a bridge back there. It's not even worth going down unless you need to stretch your legs. One thing I found interesting, now I'm right here at the creek. That's asphalt. Now I noticed some earlier when I was walking down here. And there's some right here as well. And you can tell at one point it looked to have been part of a walking path, maybe. I'm not sure. But you can tell here it just abruptly ends and the grass has overgrown it. Things like that's kind of what intrigues me. What was that? Why did they put it there? Is there a significance to it? Some things we'll never know. But it also looks like through the woods there is another little hiking trail that probably follows that Cypress Creek. We're not going to go on that. We're just going to head back to the car. I got a handful of more stops to do. And don't have a lot of time just to follow a creek with no significance. So on to the next stop. And here we are at a section of the Sunken Trace. Now I take back what I said earlier about the signs being different. I suppose they were just for the picnic areas that are changed. Now this stop here of the Sunken Trace has the typical signs that we've seen before. So I'm thinking it's just for the picnic areas. They're a little bit different. Now there's a couple different sections here, if you notice. And the reason being is if one section got too muddy, they would divert that trail into another section. Now it's definitely not as sunken as we're used to thinking. And actually there might be another piece of it right there, because that's sunken in the ground too. This is not as sunken as they are further south, as the soil is more hard and dense and compact, whereas it got closer to the Mississippi River, the soil was more sandy, what they call loam, and that's why the trace was sunken in. For years and years and decades and centuries of foot and horse traffic. But other than that, there's nothing significant back here. So I'm going to head back up this way. Take this other Sunken Trace. There's one here. That's two. Or possibly three. And there's another one here. So there's probably at least 3 or 4 sections of the original Natchez Trace trail here that you can walk on. Just take your pick. Now this is the site of the McGlammery Stand, just through the woods there. Now this stand was built in 1849, and what's significant about that is by the 1820s, the heyday of the Natchez Trace was done. By then they had started using steamboats to help get them back up the Mississippi River, so the trace was not needed as much anymore. Another interesting fact about this roadside stand is there's no significant trail marker. Now there is one down the road there about a half mile signifying that this stand or roadside stop is coming. But like the stand, the roadside marker is a thing of the past. So this is Sweetwater Branch. If you don't know what a branch is, most of us call it a creek, or in these parts of Tennessee they call it a crick. But just off to the right side here of the sign is some stairs and a walking path. It's about a half-mile loop. Takes you down by the creek. And supposedly there is a cave shelter down there that we're going to go down there and take a look at. Let's go see it. So along this trail at one point there were some information placards, and the first two that I've seen are destroyed. It is what it is. But anyways, this trail follows the Sweetwater Creek here. And supposedly it loops back around. And at the back side of it is an old cave structure. So that's what we're going to go see. It's kind of fun. I'm just talking to some other travelers. I think they're from Tennessee area. And yeah, they're kind of doing the same thing I was. Just seeing the sights and sounds, but not as in depth as what I'm doing. And kind of told my story and the background and why I'm doing it. But so, and there is some of the information placards that are up, but I'm gonna keep on hiking down this trail here. And also on the ground here now, I believe there's a black walnuts, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong, but I think that's them. If it is, the Indians used to use the walnuts to dye their clothing and their hair, which is pretty interesting how they learned that's what it did. And obviously you break one of those open, the inside's all brown and black and disgusting, but I guess when they opened it up, they realized that stained their fingers, it could stain their clothes too. So I believe this is the cave shelter. That is a giant tree right there. I don't know what type of tree it is, but it is very substantial. Anyways, this is the cave structure, I believe. There's a sign here that tells you about it. And I'm sure there might have been the Indian or two that stayed in there at one point. Pretty interesting. And there's some more rock work here along the trail. And this is the main thing I came to see, so I'm not going to keep on going down this trail. So this is the Glenrock Branch picnic area. There's a picnic table here with handicap accessible ramp. Looks like there's some restrooms. And down there is the Glenrock branch. Now right down that trail there from the restrooms leads you to the main picnic area where there's about 5 or 6 tables out here. But look at the view you have. Beautiful rock facings. Nice flowing stream. Very, very nice picnic area. If I had more time, I would definitely have a picnic here. But time is kind of the essence right now. I'm trying to get to the campsite before it gets too full. I think what I might do tomorrow is just pack me a lunch and eat it on the road. We'll see. Won't be as much time crunch tomorrow, but yeah. Very, very beautiful picnic area. Now this is what was called the Morgan Hollow picnic area, if I'm not mistaken. It's not necessarily closed, it's not necessarily open. As you can tell, there is no maintenance being done. As you can tell from the grass that's growing up for the road. Now, being a little bit of a history buff, I'm trying to understand why this was here. What is their significant value of this area? Now, walking off into the woods here is some steps. And I actually hear water flowing down there. I'm not going to get too far. But probably the creek that we were just at is right for those woods there. And I'm not going to go for all that right now. Now it kind of makes me wonder why they closed this rest stop down. Maybe because if you look, there's not much room right here from the parking lot to where it starts dropping off down the hill. When did this close? I have no idea. And also the one we just looked at is maybe 3/4 mile down the road there. So that one was probably more popular due to the rock facings and that sort of thing. But this is just one of those remnants of the past that'll probably never get used again. And if I had more time, I would definitely like to go in there and check it out and see the stream down there, but tomorrow's another day. And this is the Dogwood Mudhole. It sits to the south of the old Natchez Trace across the depression. The flat dogwood covered ridge. After heavy rains, it became almost impassable for the wagons. There's not much out here. Not even a sign, but there is one telling you that this spot is coming up. And like some of the other things here along the trace, the roadside sign is a thing of the past, except for this sign here. It says phone down, eyes up. It's a good idea. Now right across the trace here is a section of the old Trace Trail. Now just across the street from the parking lot here is a section of the old Trace Trail. It's fairly wide and fairly flat, and if you notice, it's not sunken into the ground any. Not much to see here, but maybe a 50-yard stroll through the woods. And located just outside of Lawrenceburg and David Crockett State Park in Tennessee is this little roadside display that has some information about the trace, the history of the trace, the things to see and do, and that sort of thing. And it also talks about the Trail of Tears and how they were removed from here all the way to Oklahoma, how the Indians were removed from this area. So this is what's called the Old Trace Drive. It is a 1.5 mile section of one-way paved road that follows the original Natchez Trace trail. Now the Parkway and trail are not the same. Sometimes the Parkway is on the original Trace trail and sometimes it's not. Now the Parkway was built in a way that was best for road travelers, whereas the Natchez Trace trail was built pretty much however they could. And this one-way road just weaves through the countryside here. 1.5 miles down the road here and end up back on the main part of the Natchez Trace Parkway. Now the one thing about when you're on the Trace Parkway, you don't really know when you're on part of the original trail and when you're not. But when you're on this road, you're guaranteed you're on the original Natchez Trace trail without a doubt. There's not much else out here. It's just an interesting little side trip. You get off the Parkway for a little bit. There's one thing about it, this road probably hasn't had any or much maintenance since it was made in probably the 60s or 70s, so pretty sure AAA is not going to come out here and give you a hand. So if you got a flat tire or need some roadside assistance, better call somebody or hope Sasquatch comes out here and gets you. I know for one thing, if Sasquatch does come out here, he's going to have a banjo playing. Now there is some old overlooks off to the side here, but it's not been maintained or cut down in quite a while, so it's not really even worth stopping because there's nothing to see but a bunch of bushes. And this is the Jack's Branch picnic area. Just off the trace here. There is very, very clean restrooms. But you go down these rock steps here. Takes you down here to Jack's Branch, or Jack's Creek as we would call it, to a nice little picnic area. Nice and cool down here. If you want to dip your toes off in the water, you're more than welcome to. There's about 6 or 8, or even more. Wow, it even opens up pretty good over this way. Very substantial. Now at the other picnic area, I noticed asphalt, and there's more asphalt here. So at one point, these picnic areas had more walking trails. And of course, over time and funds deplenish, things don't get maintained or upkept. But the area is very well kept and clean for what it is. As I walk down here to good old Jack's Branch. This is the site of the Napier or Napier Mine. Now this mine started back in 1820. It was very productive, yet went through quite a few owners. Now this mine closed down in 1923 at the end of World War I. And in 1930, the leftover metal structures were sold for scrap. Not much to see here, but some red clay hills and the fall leaves changing. I'm sure at one time there were some substantial structures out here, but they are a thing of the past. And this is Steele's Ironworks, or the metal Ford. Now what a Ford is a big oven that they use to make pig iron, which is very similar to cast iron. You know, this furnace was made in the 1820s along with the mine that we just seen. Now we're going to follow this loop trail here and see what we can find down here. Now this part of the trail reminds me of the Sunken Trace. As you can see, the sides of the trail are about 8 or so feet above me. Now what this probably was what's called a water race. And it was a man-made structure used to cool the furnace during the process of the pig iron making. Now they don't know exactly where the furnace was because it was long gone by the time the National Park Service got the area here. But the only thing that's left is a big slag pile. And there you can see mill race, excuse me, not water race, a mill race. As you can see, where we just came up from, comes right off this nice sized creek. But this water would be used to cool the furnaces that made the pig iron. And just like the mine, around 1923, the furnace was shut down and destroyed, leaving only the slag pile. And what slag is the contaminants, let's just say, of the steel making process. It has no value in that process, so that's all that was left. But today, only thing you got is that mill race in the creek here. A little park bench. If you want to relax, listen to the water. You can step on down here to the creek itself. It looks like it has a little bit of a cascade down there, so I'm going to go down that way and see what I can see. Well, I've reached my destination here at Meriwether Park. I'm going to use the campground here tonight, check out the trails, some of the other sights and sounds, which will be in the next video. But that concludes the first video of the second part of my Natchez Trace journey. Like always, I appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you next time.